All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are talking about one of the most incredible pieces of wiring in your entire body, the brachial plexus. Think of it as the secret control panel for your arm, the bundle of cables that powers every single thing it does, from lifting something heavy to feeling the softest touch. So, to really wrap our heads around this, let me throw a puzzle at you. Picture this. Two people have a nasty fall, both landing hard on their shoulder. Now, person number one ends up with their arm just hanging limp at their side, totally unable to lift it. But person number two, their hand becomes completely useless, with their fingers curling up into a claw-like shape. How on earth can the same type of accident lead to such wildly different results? Well, it all comes down to where the damage happens in this nerve network. If the injury is up at the top of the network, you get that waiter's tip posture. If the damage is down at the bottom, you get the claw hand. The key to solving this whole thing, it's all in the blueprint. So let's pull back the curtain on this control panel. The brachial plexus is this amazing web of nerves that starts up in your neck, weaves its way down into your armpit, and then fans out to run your entire arm. Now, this isn't just one simple nerve. It's much more like a master switchboard. The technical term is a somatic plexus, which is just a fancy way of saying it handles all the voluntary muscle control and sensory info for your whole upper limb. Your shoulder, your arm, your forearm, your hand. It's the reason you can throw a baseball, type an email, or feel a cool breeze on your skin. So how is a system this complicated actually put together? You might think it's just a chaotic tangle of wires, but it follows a surprisingly simple and logical blueprint that starts with just 5 basic parts. The whole thing is built into 5 main stages. Medical students have this classic little memory trick to remember them all, but honestly, for our purposes today, we only need to get a handle on the first 2, the absolute bedrock of the whole system, the roots and the trunks. Okay, so it all begins with 5 roots. A good way to think of them is like the starting stations on a subway map. These are basically nerve fibers that pop out from 5 specific spots on your spinal cord in your neck, labeled C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1. Now, almost right away, these roots start merging into 3 main highways, or what we call trunks. It's pretty straightforward. The top 2 roots, C5 and C6, they team up to form the upper trunk. The one in the middle, C7, it just keeps going on its own as the middle trunk. And the bottom 2, C8 and T1, they fuse together to make the lower trunk. And this brings us to a really, really critical point. When we use the word roots talking about the brachial plexus, we have to be super precise. You see, not all nerve roots are created equal, and understanding the difference is the absolute key to this entire system. And hey, don't just take my word for it. As one of the main sources for this explainer, Dr. Najib, puts it so perfectly, this is not just a tiny detail. A doctor has to be crystal clear about this distinction because, well, they are very different things. So what in the world is a brachial plexus root then? Well, it's not the little tiny rootlet that comes directly off the spinal cord itself. It's actually the ventral ramus, which is basically the front branch of the spinal nerve after it's already left the safety of the spinal column. And that means it's already a mix of different types of fibers. This chart just lays it all out beautifully. On one hand, you've got the spinal cord roots. They're tucked away inside the central nervous system, and they are specialists. They're either purely for motor signals or purely for sensory signals. But the brachial plexus roots, they're out in the wild, in the peripheral nervous system, and they're generalists. They're mixed, carrying motor, sensory, and even some autonomic signals all bundled up together. Okay, so now that we have our map, now that we understand the layout, let's go back and finally solve that mystery from the beginning. We can finally figure out what happens when this incredible system fails. A lot of the time, when this system gets hurt, the damage happens at a very specific and vulnerable spot called Erb's point. This is a little spot right on that upper trunk we just talked about, and it's basically a major intersection where a bunch of nerve pathways come together. And why is it so vulnerable? Well, get this. A whopping 6 different nerve structures all converge at this one single point. That makes it a ridiculously critical junction. And you can imagine that any damage right there is going to have some serious ripple effects on the shoulder and upper arm. And here it is. Here's where we solve the puzzle. In that fall where the head and shoulder are forced apart, it violently stretches and damages the upper trunk, those C5 and C6 fibers. The result? Erb's palsy, which gives you that waiter's tip hand. But if the arm is yanked sharply upward, the damage is to the lower trunk, the C8 and T1 fibers. And that leads to the totally different Klumpke's palsy and the claw hand. And here's one last pretty wild detail. Because a lower trunk injury involves that T1 root, a really bad one can actually damage some nearby nerves called sympathetic nerves. This can cause something called Horner syndrome, which shows up with symptoms on the face, things like a drooping eyelid and a constricted pupil, all on the same side as the arm injury. It's an incredible reminder of how everything is connected.
So, after going through this whole map, what's the big takeaway here? Why does understanding this blueprint actually matter?
What we've seen that the brachial plexus is so much more than a nerve. It's the arm's sophisticated wiring diagram. We know it's built logically from 5 roots that merge into 3 trunks. We get that critical difference now between a pure spinal root and a mixed plexus root. And maybe most importantly, we see how knowing this map lets doctors predict exactly what's gone wrong just by looking at where the injury is. I mean, it is a truly stunning example of functional design. And it really leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? If this is the elegant and complex blueprint required just to operate one of your limbs, what other incredible masterpieces of engineering are hidden inside you, working perfectly right this very second?